We don't do that. And that's why I started out by saying, we need to forgive ourselves. We need to say, it's okay for you to sit. I'm a busy working mother, and all the things. I got washing and cooking and cleaning and shopping. Hey, who's going to do it if you're dead? You give yourself the permission to stop, to sit, to calm yourself. And the more that you start to do that, the more that you'll be able to engage with connecting with your breath, to calm yourself. Now I can drive a car in the worst possible conditions, and I just breathe the way I breathe when I start to meditate, and I'm totally relaxed. I'm very much mindful, I'm in the moment, but I'm totally relaxed. And it's great. And when I feel anger coming up, I breathe and go, oh, where is that coming from? Why am I angry? I thought I dealt with you. In fact, some of the students know that I went into seclusion for about 6 weeks over the winter time. I mean, I was meditating most days, all day. And issues came up that I thought I had dealt with. Thought I dealt with all this stuff, and what are you doing coming back? But it came back at a profoundly deeper level. And I went, oh, it's you again. And this is the start of the practice and the path. You give yourself permission to stop. You allow yourself to tune out. Or else you just take a look at the mind until you're able to, within time, say, go away for 5 minutes. I'll pick you up. Or else you write it down. I'll pick you up. I'll write you down and pick you up when I'm through. If you're afraid it's going to keep bothering you, that you're going to forget something, write it down. Yes, Greg.
I think another thing that happens, though, so the hindrances tend to come up when you don't want them to, and you think you've taken care of one, and then the same thing kind of pops up somewhere else. So it could be like, you're thinking, what impact can I make on the world, right? Which, may start out as a very kind of pure, compassionate thought, right? But pretty soon becomes to, I'd be famous, right? I'd be recognized. I would get praise for doing that, right? Or to take Jan's example, you give yourself permission to just stop, right? And because you're restless, your mind is kind of all over the place. You give yourself permission to stop, and that works for a few times. But then you start noticing that you're really craving that silence, right? You're really just craving, you're easier on yourself than you really should be because you just want everything to be quiet. So it kind of, starts off as restlessness, but then it shows up as sensual desire, right? And it's kind of the same thing. It's just kind of morphing around. So the most important thing is to always be aware. Don't think that you've got these things taken care of because they're going to pop up again. And the most important thing is that when you experience one of these hindrances, when you feel these emotions, to kind of just be honest and to look at them, right? And to really assess, like, is it, is there desire there? Is it just restlessness? Is there doubt? And you kind of just, the longer you do it, the more you just kind of recognize kind of the manifestations of these hindrances, because they're going to be there for an awfully long time. So we might as well make friends with them, right? So we don't just kind of like, it's not whack-a-mole where we just hit them. Because then they just pop up somewhere else. We really have to make friends with them. We have to understand them. And we have to start working with them, right? And really understand the cause, right? And work with the cause. And with restlessness, to start with your original question, restlessness is really, for me, like in the scriptures, the remedy is really just it's studying the scriptures, right? And it's just going back and it's understanding, and I think that involves developing some faith, right? And it goes back to what Martin said about bodhisattvas trust in or they worry about causes, not effects, right? And if you have faith in karma, if you have faith that cause and effect is working, then you don't really have to worry about what the effects are. Right? You just have to worry about the causes that you're creating, the conditions you're creating. And you don't need to worry about, what is the eventual outcome, right? So, do my kids turn out okay or do they not turn out okay? Well, as long as, you were creating the right causes, right? That's all in the present, in the present.
And having an impact on the conditions too, hopefully?
Yeah, well, like we talked about before, they're really the same thing, right? And they have the same, you know, they have resultant effects. So as long as your causes, your intentions, and you know, what you're creating now is the best you can, you don't have to feel responsible for the effects if things go well. If other conditions, other causes don't come out with the outcome that you wanted, right? Because that outcome that you wanted, that's something that is just in your head, it's something that you made up.
You have no control over it.
Right, so even if your kid turns out to be like, you know, the Boston Marathon bomber, like imagine that woman, right? And second guessing like all the things that she must have done wrong. I think ultimately is, you know, she needs to look back at, okay, well, you know, what were my intentions, what were my causes, how was I dealing with, you know, my desire, my restlessness, my doubt, all that kind of thing. And if I was dealing with them in an appropriate way, then I've done everything that I can.
Do you see going to anger, do you see why I said that anger is never justifiable? Can you see that? I mean, even though you get wrapped up and possessed, do you disagree with that statement? You know, I read some time ago that you can do all these wonderful things. You can be the best parent. You can be conscious of the environment. You can be a wonderful worker. You can just be a great Buddhist, but then you can lose it all with a very bad moment of anger. It can be all washed away. And when I read that, when I saw that, I went, oh, gee, I can destroy all the good I've done with just a really bad moment of anger. And that got me looking at anger in a different way. I got myself looking at what created these thoughts within me. What creates the negative thoughts as they arise? Nobody else is in my head. But why am I thinking this way? And I'm going to I might get into it today, but I also want to point out that there's what they talk in Buddhism about, and this is in relationship to the Four Noble Truths, the 12 turnings. Now, I'm dealing with the second Noble Truth, but this applies to each and every one of the Four Noble Truths. So there's 4 Noble Truths with each area. So 3 fours of 12, of course. So the first is to recognize the causes of suffering. And as pointed out on your first sheet, there's the accumulation, which leads to karma. Accumulation of karma. The second turning is with encouragement, that the causes of suffering are understood, that you understand why you're suffering and where it's coming from. And finally, the recognition that the causes of suffering are eradicated. Oh, wouldn't that be wonderful? Not there yet. So each one of these 3 will apply to each one of the 4 Noble Truths. And I don't know, who's doing the 4th Noble Truth? You are. Okay, I don't know if you're doing the Noble. Yes?
I have a question. Question about anger. I don't know if this is
Okay.
Speak right into it.
I'm trying. You say that anger is never justified and it's never the right answer. And I guess I don't really understand in as much as a lot of times anger will propel people to action. And they talk about anger in a healing process and grieving and that kind of thing. So how can it never be the right answer?
You're looking at, I gotta answer that. Babe, please take me, please take me.
The thing is, it's anger itself can be a motivation to change. But most often, anger is most beneficial. You get angry at yourself for getting angry. Because you think about it, and you gotta think these things through, because you're gonna get angry all the time. So it's like you're in a boxing match. So if you equip yourself with mindfulness, like Greg says, if you start thinking about it, you're gonna be equipped, you're gonna have the proper training to win the war. And when you get angry, which only habituates you into getting angry, that's all being angry does, it just habituates you to be angry the next time you're faced with those conditions again. But you have to ask yourself, let's say you're stuck in traffic.
Speak into it.
You're stuck in traffic. and you're completely stopped. You got 6 lanes on the 401, right? And there's always that one jerk who blows his horn. Okay, so who does that help? Is there someone else in the pile of cards going, oh, good, at least someone had the courage to say it? You know, that does not help anybody. And more to the point, you are the traffic jam. You as the car are part of the traffic jam that you're angry about being in the middle of. So, does it help someone else for you to be angry? Let's say your child has done something wrong. Does it help them for you to be angry? Does it help you to be angry? Does it help the causes and conditions around you for you to be angry? All that it does is reinforce the fact that you have a right to rage against the world. And the more you look at these hindrances, my favorite one besides anger is envy. Okay, so when you look at envy and you think at it and you look at it, you realize all envy is you being unhappy that someone else is happy. That's stupid. Right? How does that make sense? For you to be unhappy because someone else is happy. Life isn't like that. It's not a total sum game. Because someone got something doesn't mean that you don't get something. So it's not just being washed about by these waves of emotion, of anger and greed. It's take a look at it and say, well, why am I feeling this way? And why am I reacting this way? As Greg says, you just don't bob it down. You just don't push your emotions way down. You study them, you care for them, and then you find out. So yes, even a negative thing can have positive consequences, right? But it's still a negative thing. And how much better would it be if you weren't angry?
Greg, you were wanting to add something?
Just, what we're talking about here is the cause of suffering, right? So in Buddhism, we don't really talk about right and wrong. Or we don't talk so much even about justified or not justified, right? So it's maybe a little bit misleading if you think of it as terms of like anger being justified. It's more a question of, and Martin said this really well, I just want to bring it out very clearly. What we're talking about is, does it lead to suffering or not? Right? If it leads to suffering, it should be avoided. Right? If it doesn't lead to suffering, then it should be encouraged. So is there ever a case where anger doesn't lead to suffering? Right? And that's kind of the question. And to use your example about therapy, right? That sometimes, like, you know, and I think you're talking about, like, you know, someone's encouraged to let their anger out because it kind of is bottled up or something.
Grief,
Kind of,
like
yeah,
somebody
so,
died, you go through these stages.
right. So even in that kind of case where it's grief or whether it's kind of like something bottled up, the anger is still there. Right? It just hasn't been expressed in the same way. It's just taking another form if you let it out. Right? So it's still, even if you keep it inside, it's still doing damage, it's still causing suffering. If you let it out, it's still causing suffering. Right? So the anger itself is never helpful. Right? Just like desire is never helpful, doubt is never helpful, restlessness is never helpful. Right? These things never lead to, this is why we call them hindrances, right? Is because they always lead to suffering. Right? So if we're looking at causes, they're causes.
No, you mentioned greed. I'm sorry, grief. And I wanted to expand upon that because as you progress in this practice and as you read the teachings, you will come to a point that I wish that I had this understanding today when my mother passed away. I was not a Buddhist then. I was not a practitioner of Buddhism. I would have dealt a lot differently with my mother's passing if I'd had this knowledge. Now many of us went to a recent funeral for one of our members here. His mother passed away. It's not that Buddhists don't mourn the loss, we do. I mean, we're still attached, we're human beings. But we go about it differently because we realize that it's good for them. In fact, it's the only time, I mean, the only funerals I've ever been when people go up and they congratulate for the loss of a parent or the loss. Congratulations. And you go, what? Yeah, I know, it's hard for you to think about that. But it is a whole different way of looking at things, that life is impermanent, and that life is suffering as long as we're in this form. So it's just, I know, getting your mind around that, I can tell, I can, what you're not saying. It's a difficult thing to fathom, but if you're here and you get a chance to practice, you'll understand. Yes, I mourn the loss, and I would if my husband of so many years was to pass away. Hey, I miss the guy, I really would, but I would also be happy for him. How does that sit with you?
I agree with that.
Okay.
I guess it comes from all this conventional, I don't know, it's not philosophy, I guess it would be teachings. These are the stages you go through, so I guess I thought, okay, maybe in some cases it serves a purpose.
But therapy and Buddhism sometimes are very different. So your question earlier about anger, is it better to repress anger or to express anger? And Buddhism says neither. The goal is to eradicate anger. It's not to repress or express it, it's to eradicate it. Sorry, you had a question?
So what about if you notice it, like, in larger situations, like your child's killed by a drunk driver, and then you notice that you're upset, and then that motivates you to create mad, or whatever it is. It motivates you to change something so that a condition that occurred that you feel shouldn't have occurred, from that pain you find you do something to change something in a larger context. And
Further on, we cover the great aspirations. And these great aspirations come from the four great wisdoms. And that's when you wisdom comes when you take the teachings and you apply them to your experience and you grow. I use the example that you don't get anywhere if everything's nice and smooth. It's when these challenges come. So you learn and you change, you adapt, you transform. Any of the students that stayed here last Saturday got a chance to hear some of the people that the facilitators here talk about how these classes have helped them and in what ways. So there will be this opportunity to apply and get wisdom from it, and at even higher levels. And that's where you apply that and something good comes out of a tragic loss. Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, with your handout, the last page, there's a little thing about why do I suffer? What did you think about that? Did you want to break into little groups and discuss it? No? Venerable Man, he said, oh, it's good. She says, you have 2 classes on suffering so people can break into groups and discuss.
We don't have enough time.
Yeah, sure.
Well, we can. So what do you think about it? At first, I worked so hard for 2 meals. I got this for last week's class because I was talking about crave, about craving. And I actually said to them that because in my research for the second realization of great beings, craving and desire are so caught up in it. But our marketplace, the food industry, spends billions of dollars getting the right mixture of fat, salt, and sugar to crave. Their whole thing is that we crave for things. I mean, we're almost doomed to fail, aren't we? When we think that this is going on. I used the example of a bag of potato chips last week. I don't buy them. I don't allow those in my house. Because if there's a bag of potato chips there, I'll eat them. And you know, and as I used the example last week, and excuse me for repeating this for the ongoing students, at the back it says what, 12 or 15 chips is what you should have. And I used the example, I don't get a bowl and put 12 or 15 chips. Oh, I'm going to count each one. Yeah, right. And when there's a third of the bag left and 2/3 are in your stomach, you go, oh, Then you think, I can't leave a third of the bag back. So you eat the whole thing, and you get rid of the evidence. No, you do. And then your husband says, where's the bag of chips? Oh, I don't know. And again, you lie. You're lying again to yourself. And then you're lying to him. But it's you that gets on the scale with the chocolate cake. And the doctor goes, oh, Tony, you didn't do this. Poor Tony. I'm sorry, sweetie. Tony's done well. How much have you lost now? No, 20 pounds. Good stuff.